before I have to say, the examples I brought with me are some kind of flippant. They are really made up. I use mocks all over it. I would never do this in a production system, but I think you will get the idea. So let's switch to my Eclipse. The rest of the session is just coding. This is a new workspace. I have only set up two things. The first one, I have added a new target platform. I added the latest Equinox SDK and the latest Mockito version. And the second thing is I increased the font size of the Java editor. So if you can't read it in the back, just point me and I will increase it more. So I thought long about the example, what we're going to do. And I would say this is a Mockito talk, so we're going to implement a cocktail bar. And let's do this. So the first thing is I have to create a new bundle. Let's name it org EclipseCon cocktail.bar. Bar. I use OSGi framework standard. Click next. Don't need an activator yet, and version is sufficient. So just click finish. So where to put the tests in? We always go with test fragments because from our experience they are making the most less trouble. So PDE plays really well with test fragments, and for your build system test fragments are good. So we will go with test fragment. The good thing about fragments is that they share the class path of the original bundle. So we can also test package private stuff or classes that will not be exposed with the manifest. So this is good for testing. I create a fragment project. Let's name it org EclipseCon cocktailbar.test. As a host, I have to set the cocktail bar. And click finish, we're ready to go. So next thing I have to do is to create some dependencies to our tests. Because we want to use JUnit as test framework and we want to use Mockito, so I have to add it as a dependency. I know there's a lot of discussion about require plugins versus import package, so we had the rule in our bundle, we only use import package, but for our test fragment, it's not so important because the test fragment only lives in a controlled environment, so we can go with import package here, but only import require plugins here. And we do this just because PDE does not play so well with import package. Let's add JUnit. I go with version 1.10, it's the latest I think, and I will add Mockito. I go with version 1.9.5, it's also the latest, I think, and we go. Don't need the manifest. So I remove the outline. The editor area needs to be big. So, okay, we do test-driven development, so we start with a test, and we're going to implement the cocktail bar, so every cocktail bar needs a bartender. And let's write a bartender test. I create a class. It's bartender test. I use the package org EclipseCon cocktail bar, and we are good. Is this okay in the back? Can you read the code? Chris, yes? No? Okay. Give me a second. Java editor, edit. Better? Okay, good. Okay, so let's start with the first test method. We want to make sure that our bartender mixes a drink and he uses the right ingredients. So we will write a test. Test uses ingredients. And of course we're using JUnit 4, so we have to annotate it with add test. And we have our first test. So what we need first is a bartender. New bartender. I will assign it, create the class first, and here we have to create it in the bundle. Okay, and I will assign it to a local variable. The next thing is we want to call the method bartender.mixDrink, and we will pass over a drink object and ingredients object. of course, I have to create those objects too, so I create the variables first. And trink is not of the type object, it's trink. I have to create a class in my bundle. And here's the first time we can use a mock. Because we don't care about our trink object, we just care about our bartender, so having the trink as a mock is sufficient. So what I have to do now is typing mockito.mock trink.class. And basically this works, but it really sucks because I don't want to type every time mockito.mock. I want to use mocks as a static import. So I convert it to a static import and we're good to go. But this only solves this problem for this test class. If I create a new test class, I also have to convert Mockito as a static import. So the first thing what I do is when I set up a workspace is to go to preferences and type in favorites. And our lovely content assist has some favorites. And this means if I add a package or a type to this content assist favorites, they will automatically appear in my content assist. So I have not to care about my imports. It will all done for me by Eclipse. So I add a new type. And this is Mockito. I also add Mockito matches. We need this too. And this is not Mockito specific, but having the JUnit asserts as static imports is cool too. So adding them, or JUnit asserts. And we're good to go. So I redo my import, and as you can see, I just can type mock, and here are my mock methods. So all in my content assist. This makes it very efficient to write tests. And we need here now some ingredients. We also use a mock for this. And we need to create this class in our bundle. So, of course, the mixed string method does not exist, so I have to create it. It will take a string and some ingredients. It's good. And now we can do our first checking here. And what we wanted to check is that the bartender calls at least get ingredients before he starts to mix, before he mixes the drink. So we now can just type verify ingredients. Get ingredients will be called, and the get ingredients method needs to be on the in the type ingredients. Let's return a list and return null. So this is good. Okay, and our test compiles, and we can run it. You can see it. It's red because we have not implemented our mixed string method. So let's change this. Go in our mixed string method. Just type ingredients, get ingredients, so the bartender knows which ingredients to use. And we can rerun the test, and it's green again. So with this, I can check that a method will be called. Let's add another test. Call it test shake string, because after the bartender calls get ingredients, he needs to put the ingredients together and shake it before it will serve to a customer. So we basically have the same setup here. We just need to change our verify, namely verify drink dot shake. This means verify that the bartender calls the shake method on the drink object. We need to create the shake method, and we're good to go running the test. They are red. This is good. And we can call here drink.shake, run the test again, and they are green. This is good. We have two green tests and have used some mocks. The bad thing about this is that we have introduced some duplicated code, and our tests are not so clean anymore. And we wanted to change this. So we're using a setup method for this. Public void setup. We need to annotate it with setup before. And let's move those lines into the setup method. This gives us the option that we can also delete such lines because they are simply the same. And we need to convert those variables to fields. Did it, our test compiles, we can run it, and they are green. So the bad thing about this is that I do the mock instantiation by myself. In this test case, I just want to test my bartender. I don't care about mock instantiation. And the cool thing is, Mockito can do this for us. We can simply annotate our drink object with @mock and also our ingredients object, and we don't need to call the mock methods on its own. So Mockito will take care about the mock creation, but I have to call this method, Mockito annotations. Init mocks this in the setup method. And this is not so cool because I just replaced one instantiation with another, so it does not make very much sense. But Mockito can do even better. I can remove this line and just run this test case with the Mockito, where is it? With the Mockito JUnit runner. And when a test is annotated run with Mockito JUnit runner, it uses the Mockito JUnit runner, and all the fields annotated with @mock will be instantiated for us by Mockito. So I have reduced the lines of code, and our mocks will be instantiated. Let's run the test, and they are green again. So the result is we have 2 clean tests, and we want to add some more. And what needs the bartender to do when he has mixed the drink? He needs to notify a waitress to serve the drink to a customer. So we write our third test, and this is test notifies waitress. Whoops. Sorry. This one. Okay. So basically, the call bartender mixed drink is the same as in the test above, but we don't need to verify that the drink shake is called. We need to verify something like this: verify waitress dot serve drink will be called with our drink object. For this, of course, we need a waitress type, and this can also be a mock. And to make it compile, I have to create the class in our bundle. And I have to create the serve drink method. So our test compiles. I can run the test, but it does not make much sense because it's red. We have no interactions between our waitress and our bartender. And because we're living in a system based on OSGi, waitresses are OSGi services, and they can exist more than once in the system, and they can go and come. So the waitress is loosely coupled to the bartender. And for some reason, don't ask why, we can't use decorative services, and we need to call the service the old way, the OSGi way with BundleContext, get service, and so on. So let's do this. Let's switch to the implementation for a minute. Our implementation can look like this. I introduce a method, notify waitress with our drink, and I create a method. And in this method, I now need the bundle context. I don't want to inject the bundle context as a constructor argument or so. I want to get it at runtime. And the good thing is OSGi framework has a service method for this, but I need to add an import first. I import package osgi.framework. I don't care about versions right now. And I can call framework util, framework util get bundle for bartender, which returns the bundle object for the bundle which have the bartender class in it. So I assign it to a variable. This can be null, so I just make a null check if bundle is not null. So ready to go. What we need to do now is get the bundle context. So I call bundle get bundle context, assign it to a variable. I want a service object, so I say bundle context get service reference for our waitress class. I assign it to a variable reference. I don't care if it's null at this point, but it can be null. What I need to do now is say bundle context get service for our reference, and this will return the actual waitress object. We go with one waitress for this example, and I can say waitress serve drink drink. Okay, I have done the implementation first. Let's step back to the test. We need to tell our bartender object now that our mocked waitress will be returned when it's collected as a service. So how to do this? We can mock our bundle. Let's say mock bundle.class. This is our bundle. We can also mock the bundle context. This is our bundle context. And we can say when bundle get bundle context is called, then return our bundle context object. So now we know that we need to get a service reference out of this bundle context, so we'll mock a service reference. Here it is, service reference. Assign it to a variable, it's our reference. And we say when bundle context get service reference for our waitress.class, then return our reference. Here we go. Now we need to return our waitress when bundle context get service is called with this reference object. So I say when bundle context get service with our reference, then return our waitress. And we are ready, but we still will have a red test because we have a natural enemy in our code for testing, and this is the call to the static method. Static API is evil. I think you all know this. I talked to Peter Greens at EclipseCon in March, and he told me the reasons why this method exists and why it has to be static. So, okay, it's a static method, it's good. But we can't mock static methods with Mockito. There is another framework called PowerMark, which acts as an extension for Mockito and other mocking frameworks. And this does some bytecode manipulation, so you will be able to mock static methods. But I don't want to introduce a bytecode manipulation framework just to mock my getBundle method. So there needs to be an easier solution. And the solution we have used is we extract this static call into a wrapper method. Let's call it getBundle. And this method has to be package private. It has to be package private because it needs to be visible to the test. In our test, we can now do the following. I have my mocked waiters and I have my mocked bundle. Now I need to tell the bartender to use this mocked bundle when the getBundle method will be called. So the first thing I do is I need to introduce a spy. A spy is a partial mock. Partial mock means that some methods are real, some methods are mocked. So in our case, we will mock the getBundle method, but we will use the real mixed string method. And we can do this by saying do return bundle when bartender2, I rename it later, get bundle will be called. Of course, when I do this on this spied object, I also need to call mixed string on this spied object. And I can try to run the test, and it's green again, because we just made out a spy of our real object. The bad thing about this is that we have messed up the test code really a lot. So we need to make it clean again. The first thing we're going to do is convert the waitress to a field. And because we have the Mockito JUnit runner, we can also annotate it with that mock. The second thing is I don't want to have this code in my test case. I extract it and call it mock bundle and call it, oh, where it is? Here it is. And call it mock bundle. The second thing I want to do is I don't want to set up the spy in this test method. I want to use the spy all over it well, because this getBundle method will be called from every test method, because I always call mixed string. So I always need the bartender to be a spy. This means I just change the line, the setup, and say, instead of new bartender, I say spy new bartender. And we have our spy. So I can remove this method. Bartender2 does not exist anymore. Need to change it. Let's see if the tests are still green. They are green. So I said I want to have this bundle for every test method, so it has to be in the setup method. Here it is. And I will have at least a clean test method for now. Now we have the bundle code twice. No, I'm sorry. No, it's just once. Okay. What I've done here is calling the spy. Sorry, yeah? Okay, so I don't get the question. I should run this as plugin test, so I have to do the whole setup. I didn't have a launch configuration or so, but I can try just run it as. But let me clean up the test, and then we will run it as plugin test. Okay. Okay, so I have used the spy method in here, and we don't need to use the spy method because Mockito has mock annotations. So why not just have spy annotations? And it has spy annotations. I just annotate the bartender with @spy, and Mockito will instantiate the spy for us. So we have clean test methods. Again, test is green, and the question was, can I run this as plugin tests? Because he faced some problems using this method. I have no clue. I have never done this with plugin tests, but let's find out. I bet we will receive some errors on the console here. Come to me after the talk, and we can set up this and try it out.
The problem is Mockito cannot override the packet private method. You need to mark it as package when it's in the OSGi program. I don't know exactly why this is, I think, because of the different.
Okay, can't really believe this, but let's discuss this at the end of the talk, okay? So he just said Mockito can't mock package private methods. So for running this in a JUnit plugin test, it needs to be protected. I have no clue if this is right. We will see after the talk, because I have mocked a package private method right here. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we will introduce some errors in here. Let's say our code has grown over the last years, and some new employee has introduced a bug. He throws an illegal state exception in here. The reason is not known. And of course, this makes our test fail. But luckily, we have tests, so we can easily fix this. But for some reason, we need to debug the code because it's so big and we can't see the error on the first look. So let's add a breakpoint, for example, at the first mixed string method. So I say debug as JUnit test. Okay, I open the debug perspective. And it stops at this call, so I will step into it. What I've expected to see is the content of my mixed string method. What I actually see is the content of some Mockito code. So this is because we have made a spy out of our bartender, and Mockito has made a copy at runtime of this bartender object, and you will always land in some Mockito code if you debug such an object. So the thing is, we can study this code and step through, and in the end we can land in our actual implementation. But we're using Eclipse, and this is really not necessary, because Eclipse has a concept built in, or a preference, a feature that's called debug step filtering. Debug step filtering, you can define packages that will be skipped during debugging. So we can just say we want to use step filters and we want to add a package. And the packages are org Mockito, because we're not interested in Mockito code. We also want to ignore everything that's in Helmcrest, because we're not interested in Helmcrest call. We also, I just check here java.star, because we don't want to land in some reflection code. And we also do not want to land in some sun reflection code. So you can make finer filters, but for this test, it's sufficient. As a result, I can run the test again, and it will stop at this method and just press F5 for step into, and I'm in my actual implementation. So all the Mockito stuff is just skipped. It's really cool. So let's see if we can find the error. Illegal state exception, it's clear. Let's remove it and go on. Was really hard to fix. So we have clean tests. No, I think. Okay. Yeah, they are green again. So what we have done so far is work with some mocks, and we have seen how a static method can be mocked using this wrapper method trick. But what we haven't done right now is we haven't tested the mixed string method really well, because we have, for every action in this method, we have a test. We have test for get ingredients, for shake, and for serve drink. But these methods only make sense if they are called in the right order. It doesn't make sense to notify a waitress before the drink is shaked. So what we have done is we haven't tested this. And I can prove this. I just changed the order. I say notify waitress sits on top. So I notify the waitress with an unfinished drink. Oh, damn it. I forgot to make preference. Do you remember that Eclipse in version 3.5 or so, when I press F11, it always launched the previous launch configuration, and now it tries to launch it with a fucked up launch configuration. So you can configure this. Simply go to launching and click always launch previously launched configuration. I press F11. I forgot to remove the breakpoint. Run the test, and we have green tests. So I have changed the order, and our tests are green. So we need to add another test to make sure that the order is right. Let's copy this test method and name this test respects order. And what we want to do is we want to verify that a bartender calls ingredients, get ingredients, then shake, and then serve drink. But this does not check the order. Mockito has, for this, has a special object. It's called an order object. And you can just say, in order for the mocks, ingredients, drink, and waitress. Assign it to a variable, it's an order, and this order object has a verify method, so I just can call order.verify, copy it in front of every verify method, run the test, and it's red now because I have changed the order of my notify waitress. We'll place it to the bottom, run the test again, and they are green. So within order, we can verify that the order of some calls is correct. So the next thing I want to show you is how to validate arguments. Let's do this by an example too. So we have our test notifies waitress, and you know when the waitress brings the string to the customer pays the waitress, and the waitress needs to put the money back in their cash box. So every waitress will have a cash box, and we need to test that the waitress pays string in cash box. So we will need something like a cash box. So we have new cash box. Is mock cash box, of course. And I need to create the cash box object in the bundle too. Here it is. So what we want to do is that when the mixed string method is called, all the chain is going through, and we want to check that verify cash box pay drink is called with our drink object and the amount of $5 or so. So let's create this method, and we are good. We have a red test, and this is because we haven't coupled the cash box and the waitress yet. And of course, we can create a constructor with a constructor argument that takes a cash box. We will do this in the waitress. Waitress takes a cash box, assign it to a field, and let's also call the method box dot pay drink and $5. And we run the test. Of course, this reads again because we haven't called the constructor yet. The waitress is a mock, so we need to make a decision. Either we want to use waitress, we wanted that the waitress will be a mock or it's a real object, but we wanted to do some verification on the waitress. So we already knew the concept of spies, so making out of spy of the waitress would be sufficient. But this would also introduce to have 2 lines of code. New waitress with the cash box, and then say spy. Mockito has a cool annotation for this. This I will show you. Let's first transform the cash box to a field. So we don't need to call the constructor anymore. And let's make a mock out of it. I remove these lines on top, and we have here the mock waitress. We have said we want to make a spy out of it. And now we want that Mockito creates this waitress and calls the constructor with the cash box mock for us. And we can simply do this by adding inject mocks. Mockito looks up the waitress object, and it sees that there's a constructor taking a cash box, and it will notice in this test case there is a mock from the type cash box, so it will inject it in a constructor. It also works with field injection, so I don't even need the constructor. Yes, please.
If you don't do this with this inject mock, would it be constructed with just another mock of the cash box?
No, it will use the mock line, the next line on top.
Without the injected mocks, without this inject. Without the inject mocks.
Would it use the mocked cache box without inject mocks?
Would it
Well, don't know the answer. We can try it, but it doesn't make sense in this case because we want to do some verification on the cashbox object. So need to test it.
What if I have multiple versions of a cashbox object? Can I tell it which one to use?
Let's step into inject mocks. I never needed this. It seems to be a simple annotation, so I would say no, but don't take it too seriously. Look it up in the Mockito documentation. I never needed to use this. So for the others, the question was, if I have multiple cashbox objects in this test case, can I add a parameter or so to the inject mock annotation to decide which cashbox to inject? My answer was, I don't know. We need to look up this in the documentation. But I think it's really a rare use case. Having too much object, I mean, this is really heavy for a test case. Having so much fields is just for this example. Having too much object would lead probably to more test cases. Sorry, don't get it.
So let's say you have a transaction object which needs two accounts. And how do you say the index of which is the first?
I can't understand you verbally.
If the transaction if you have two accounts for a transaction, which one account you can select? Can you just show if there are parameters for annotation, maybe like name?
Yeah. I stepped already into inject mocks and.
Just scroll down.
Yeah, it's done.
It's
So it does not have any parameters. So I would say no, it can't handle different versions of the objects. I would say this is correct because you see the annotation has no parameter. I have no clue how to do it other way. But yeah, let's take a look at this after the talk and just move on here. So what we have now is a spied waitress, and we have injected the cashbox object. We can run the tests again and see if they work. And they work because our waitress calls the pay drink method. Let's do a false positive. Go into waitress, comment out this line, run the test again, and they are red, so the test works, and it's green. Here we are. So, but what if our amount of dollars for the drink is not just a simple variable, a simple type, it's an object. For example, we have an amount object. Then we can say verify that the pay drink method will be called for any amount object. I create the class in our bundle. I will also add some implementation. I add a constructor, which takes a double box to fields. Get box, simple pocho. So we're good to go. This is our amount object. So this verifies that the pay drink method, which we need to change mesh method, and we also need to change this call here. Say new amount. And we're good, the code compiles, and we can run the tests, and it will throw an error you will see a lot when using Mockito. I see it every day, and I know the reason why this error happens. Because we mixed up a matcher. As you can see, take a look at any method. It's of type matcher, and you mix the real object. So if you do verification, you can use only matchers or only real objects. So what we need to do is call equals drink. So now we're using only matchers, and the test compiles. But what we have given up is to check if the amount is $5. We now just verify that this method is called with any amount. So in the first, when we used Mockito, we had a solution for this problem, which is simply wrong. I will show it to you to see how to do it not. This was answering. we added some code to have a custom answer object when a method will be called. And in this answer object, we did our verification. So I just write a code and it will be clear. I say do answer, new answer with object. When cashbox page drink will be called with our drink and any amount. So now I need to implement a method. This is answer. And this method will be called when the method pageRank on our cashbox object will be called. What we can do here is to add some code, say invocation, which is an argument, get arguments, the argument at position 1, which is our amount. I need to do a cast. And here I can say assert equals $5 amount get bucks. And this will work. Oh, I forgot to use this. The test is green. Let's do a false positive. That's $6 and the test is red. So the drawback of this is, first, it's really ugly. Second, it's not only ugly, it's unreadable. And the worst thing of all, it builds a pattern which I really care about, and this is the BuildOperateCheck pattern. Does someone know this pattern? Okay, one guy. Okay, we have used this pattern over the whole session, and this is for test methods. It's a pattern how to structure test methods. It says, do the setup, add an empty line, do the actual action, add an empty line, and then do some checking, some assertions. This pattern was introduced by Uncle Bob in his clean codebook, so this makes tests really readable. And what we have done here is, from a reading point of view, we do the assertion before we call the actual action. So from my point of view, this is the worst drawback of this solution. The good thing is, someone told me a better solution, and I will show it to you. Our goal is still that we want to verify that the pageRank method will be called with an amount of $5. So we need to get this amount object that is passed into this method. And Mockito has a cool thing for this. This is the argument captor. I can just call argument captor for class amount.class, and this will return the capture object. I call it captor. And instead of any amount, I pass in captor.capture. What I can do now is say assert equals $5 for our captor get value, which returns the passed in amount object, and say get bucks. And these two lines does exactly the same as the 10 lines before. So I start a test, it's green. Let's do a false positive. It's red. It's green again. And we are at the end of this session. This is all I have to tell you about Mockito. I hope you could learn something new, and I think we still have a little bit time left for questions. So thanks for your attention. Any questions? What?
Nothing to do with Mockito per se, but you run the test with this test runner, Mockito test runner. What happens if I have more than one test runner? So
Yeah.
With,
Yeah, or Spring test runners. Okay, so the question was, I run this test with the Mockito JUnit runner. What if I want to run it with another test runner? So the JUnit framework does not allow to run a test with more than 2 test runners. A simple workaround is write your own runner and call the run methods of the different runners in it. So all the Mockito JUnit runner does is calling Mockito annotations init mocks. So you can combine it with your own runner. But this is no problem of JUnit. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Or he just says you don't have to use annotations. You can all the instantiation by yourself. But yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, please. Yeah, sure. So the question was, we use OSGi bundles, but I haven't started any OSGi environment, and this is true. The question was, is it possible to use Mockito in OSGi environment, so in plugin tests? And yeah, he thinks yes, it's possible, of course. Yeah, sure. This was a question by him before, in the middle of his session. So to repeat it, it was when I run this as plugin tests, I can't mock package private methods. They need to be protected, right?
You can't override them by spy.
Okay, so the spy can't override it. I have no answer to this question because we haven't tried. Yeah, Mark?
I also have very poor experience with spy classes and OSGi.
Okay. Okay, also. Okay.
Classes,
So 3 guys who do not know each other, right, have problems with spies and running plugin tests, so it needs to be true. Okay, okay. Yeah, so we always use just plain JUnit tests when it's possible. We don't use plugin tests a lot, so I have no experience with this. Because you... What? Build Tycho. Yeah, but we don't use the Tycho Surefire plugin. We just use the plain Surefire plugin, you know? Okay. So any other question? Okay. So I will close this session. I would appreciate your +1 votes and have a nice evening.